Dear listeners, welcome to a special edition of Handelsblatt Crime. A few days ago, we released an episode about Daniel Starr, an American startup entrepreneur who was unjustly imprisoned in November 2022 and remains embroiled in a legal battle with a German state attorney who does not appear to be playing by the rules. The response to this episode has been intense. It inspired us to create an English version so this dramatic and unusual case can reach a broader international audience. For production reasons, this version of the podcast uses voices generated by artificial intelligence, with the important exception of Daniel Starr's own voice. And now, please enjoy Handelsblatt Crime, the strange case of Daniel Starr.
I was landing. I saw a lot of lights on the runway, police lights. And I was concerned something must have happened at the airport. And as we landed, I saw that all of those cop cars were outside of my airplane. And so I was the only person on the plane. And so I said to my pilot, jokingly, I said, "What'd you do?" And he said, "No, it's not me. It's you." I was holding a copy of the book, The Alchemist. I had just finished reading it on the plane for the millionth time. It's quite funny. I just read the part about kind of your personal legacy and, reaching the highest point. And I felt really good. I just donated a company to charity. I was thinking to myself, my legend is strong right now. And I probably had 30 seconds of enlightenment before the door opened. And then I was taken by very highly militarized French police. They put me on the ground. And they all had, heavy artillery, heavy machine guns all pointed at me. I had a guy with a knee on my neck, and they asked me if my name was Daniel Starr. I said it was. And what exactly did I do? And he said, "I don't know. I have a European arrest warrant to get you."
This dramatic arrest at Paris airport happened to a man whose name may not mean much to most, Daniel Starr. But Daniel Starr is no ordinary figure. He is a multimillionaire tech entrepreneur from California, very likely a billionaire with vast resources and powerful connections. The U.S. State Department has taken up his cause. Richard Grenell, the former U.S. ambassador to Germany, has posted furious messages on X, and even Vice President J.D. Vance has stepped in. Why? Because the heavy-handed arrest of Daniel Starr in Paris in November 2022 should never have happened. It wasn't lawful, and his case raises troubling questions about arbitrariness in the German justice system. My colleagues Zernke Iwersen and Volker Votsmeier from the Handelsblatt investigative team uncovered this story. And with them, I'll unpack it all today on the podcast. Every 2 weeks on Handelsblatt Crime, we examine the biggest disputes in German business, who's behind them, how they came about, and the system that makes them possible. My name is Gode, and this is Handelsblatt Crime. Hello, Zynka.
Hello, Zolvi.
And hello, Volker.
Hello, Zolvi.
So, who is Daniel Starr, and why are we even talking about his case today?
Daniel Starr is a U.S. millionaire. He grew up in Scranton, Pennsylvania, the same city as former President Joe Biden. He studied psychology, considered medical school, but instead, he founded a company. In New York, he outfitted taxis with screens. There are a lot of taxis in New York, and he was one of the very first to do it, long before Uber or similar platforms.
Right, that's something most of us remember from the backseat of a car.
Things took off quickly. After just over a year, he sold his stake in the company and moved where you go if you want to become a startup millionaire, California. There he joined another startup. That one was called MySpace, the first real social network to go mainstream, what Facebook later became. And before TikTok, before Instagram, there was MySpace. It was the dominant platform when social media first exploded.
I vaguely remember MySpace. Growing up in Germany, it wasn't really a thing anymore, but in the 2000s, it was the first big social network, especially in the US. Basically the forerunner to Facebook, right?
Starr was there. He rose through the ranks and watched it grow. Then, as entrepreneurs in California often do, he struck out on his own. First, a payment service, back when people were just starting to pay on the internet. If you built the platform, you could make a fortune. Then a gaming service, essentially a Netflix for video games. Instead of choosing a movie, you'd log in and pick a game. That venture was successful too. After that, came a string of new businesses, and now he's head of global affairs at a company called AppLovin. It's not widely known, but it's massive. And right now it's making headlines because it's working on acquiring the non-Chinese part of TikTok. And that's no ordinary deal. TikTok has become the most controversial app in the world. US authorities have warned about it like no other. Trump threatened to ban it, then pulled back, then threatened again. Now, the takeover of TikTok's international business could become one of the largest and most expensive acquisitions in history. And right in the middle of it is Daniel Starr. As head of global affairs, he plays a central role, which makes it all the more astonishing that the German justice system accused him of tax crimes and sent heavily armed French police after him. That November night, instead of returning to his villa in California, Daniel Starr spent it in a Paris jail cell.
I arrived at the police station or jail, asked them what I had done wrong. They also said they didn't know. They had me strip, took photos of my body, my tattoos, fingerprinted me. Then they brought me into a room. I asked for an attorney, and then I spent a few days in a third world prison. It felt surreal, and to be in a cell with a hole in the floor and a toilet. I mean, it didn't seem like that was France. It seemed like it was sort of medieval dungeon. I take medication. I threw away all my medication. And I kept asking them when I was going to be told of my charge or what was going to happen, what I was being detained for. And they refused me a lawyer. They refused me pretty much anything. They refused to tell me why I was even there.
And then it takes this wild turn, because when you listen to Starr himself, you can hear the disbelief in his voice. This can't be real. This can't be happening to me. There's the shock, of course, but also sheer confusion. He says he had no idea what he was accused of. He wasn't allowed to call a lawyer. No lawyer was provided. Think about that, being arrested, held in custody, and only in a French courtroom hearing, for the first time, what you're supposedly guilty of? Until then, according to him, he was completely in the dark. So Volker, what exactly is Daniel Starr accused of? And who is pressing charges?
He hasn't been charged yet. He's under investigation for tax evasion. The allegation is that between 2015 and 2020, he failed to pay value-added tax, or VAT, on revenue from several companies active in Germany. Under German law, if you generate revenue here, you must remit VAT. Prosecutors claim he didn't. That's how the investigation began, probably around 2020. But according to Starr, he never knew about it, which is why he was completely blindsided at the airport in Paris. The European arrest warrant came from the prosecutor's office in Bonn. They suspected he might flee. That's how you get a warrant like this, and why he ended up in pretrial detention.
Let's hear Daniel Starr himself on the allegations.
Their allegations were that an unknown person with some relationship to an office in West Hollywood owned some portion of a company that didn't pay their VAT taxes. And so I said, do you have any specific information about this being me? It's a big office building. I did have an office there, but and they said no. But I said, I'm happy to provide all the paperwork if I see the name of the company that you're interested in. It's a company that I owned many years ago. Well, they thought it was from 2011 to 2015, but they had I had updated them and let them know I only owned it for about 4 months before I sold it. I gave them all the paperwork. To prove that, I had the lawyers who worked on the deal all give notarized statements saying that they, in fact, did this transaction. It was real.
So, to sum it up, Starr denies everything. He insists he's innocent.
He insists he's innocent. He says those companies have long since been sold, that their revenues weren't taxable in Germany. He simply doesn't understand it. But what he did understand immediately is that no businessman can live with investigations and arrests hanging over them. The reputational damage alone is devastating. So he tried what Americans sometimes call throw money at the problem.
And I even offered at the time to just pay whatever the fine was, even though I didn't owe it. I just figured, you know what? It's not worth the headache. I'll pay the amount, which was, I think, like 4 million euros or something like that. That was for the whole 4 or 5 years. My portion was like 200 grand or 300 grand or some tiny number. And I offered to pay the whole thing. And the prosecutor responded to my attorneys that he wants to seek 15 years in prison, that the money isn't the issue. It's the principle of it, which is, I mean, I think I would get less time if I came to Germany and killed someone.
But the stakes were enormous. He was facing up to 15 years in prison. And then there's this detail he shared with us. The day he was arrested in France, another man was brought in at the same time. A convicted terrorist who had driven a truck into a crowd. Starr says that man's bail was set lower than his own. His bail, just under 3 million euros. In cash, almost unheard of. So, Zoomke, what happened next?
At first, he says he felt like a terrorist. He just could not make sense of it. Here was an established businessman, suddenly told he had to post bail in cash. His lawyer had to show up with a bag of money in person. Eventually, his attorney sent him a French defense lawyer, the best, as he puts it. Starr was released on bail, but had to remain in Paris for 3 months, reporting to the police twice a week. He describes the process as harassment, endless waiting rooms, hours wasted week after week. Of course, he had the means to fight back. And in December 2022, just a month later, the Bonn Regional Court overturned the warrant as unlawful.
But the prosecutor's office appealed. And then the case moved up to the next court.
Because according to the Bonn Regional Court, this spectacular arrest should never have happened in the first place.
Exactly. The higher regional court in Cologne. And that court also confirmed the arrest warrant should never have been issued. They found no grounds for extradition and no strong suspicion of a crime. So, it was very clear. Both the Bonn Regional Court and the higher regional court rejected what the prosecutors had put forward. Of course, we asked the Bonn prosecutor's office for comment, but because the investigation is still ongoing, they declined to provide details.
And yet, the investigation is still ongoing. That's what makes this case so striking. How could all of this unfold without solid suspicion? For Starr, that question is at the heart of everything. After 3 months, by March 2023, the worst was finally over. He was allowed to return home to California to his family. At the time, he had a small child waiting for him, and a father battling cancer.
It took 3 months. When I finally got home, I thought it was all over because the European arrest warrant had been revoked. Shortly thereafter, my father passed away. My dog had passed away. I mean, like everything terrible you can think of. I was working on a construction project for this home. That turned into multiple litigations because when you're not at a construction site and you're building a big property and everyone hears that you're in jail in France, they stop working and keep billing. And I've consistently tried to fight to have this investigation formally closed because I'm innocent and I've never traveled again because the fear of detainment is very real.
But Starr says he can no longer travel. Out of fear, he'll be arrested again. And that raises a key concept. Legal certainty. You need to trust that authorities apply the law as it's meant to be applied. Here, Starr has it in black and white that the Bonn prosecutors got it wrong, yet he still spent months in custody. So we asked the prosecutor's office, can he travel or not? Because in practice, he says he hasn't left the U.S. in 3 years. Imagine that. He's head of global affairs at a major international company, right in the middle of the biggest acquisition in its history. But he can't board a plane. How do you explain that to business partners? To your own team? I can't go to Berlin or Frankfurt or Shanghai. Why not? Because there's a proceeding. Or maybe not. I don't even know. That's not a situation anyone can live with.
But of course, suspicion leaves a mark. Business partners see you're under investigation, and some quietly decide to step away.
We pressed the Bonn prosecutor's office on this point. What's the situation? Can Daniel Starr travel or not? Their answer? Yes, he can. The arrest warrant was lifted. There's no restriction at all. Legally, he can travel anywhere without impediment, but on paper, is one thing. For Starr, the fear remains.
But for Daniel Starr, that's not enough. He says the whole experience traumatized him. His worry is, who guarantees this won't happen again on his next trip abroad? they could just issue a new warrant. He has no certainty. He lived through it once, and he found it absolutely disturbing. So now he prefers to stay in the U.S.
And it wasn't even the first time. There had already been a warrant against him that turned out to have no basis, but it still happened. So what does Starr want now? What would be enough for him? A formal end to the proceedings?
For him, that's not enough. He says, what's to stop the prosecutor from doing it again? Going to a judge who signs off without looking too closely. And if he's in Greece or Italy or Spain, will they question it or just arrest him on the spot? So his position is clear. This has to be sorted out at the root. Either the prosecutor closes the case officially in writing or indicts him. One of the two. It's already been 3 years. He refuses to live in limbo. He puts it in very American terms. Justice delayed is justice denied. And for him, justice means certainty that he won't be slammed to the ground by armed officers at another airport.
And then there's this. For 3 years, he says he had no idea what evidence investigators even claimed to have. Only very recently did he finally learn what's supposedly in their files.
I've seen the evidence in my case, and their evidence was my name on a office lease. I mean, and that's about it. That's a pretty low degree of evidence to come after someone.
When were you finally able to see that evidence?
3 days ago. It took the prosecutor 3 years. It took me interacting with the Trump administration, Rick Grinnell, Marco Rubio, a ton of other advocates that I have, putting a ton of pressure on the German government to push this prosecutor to hand over a file. He handed over an incomplete file that didn't even have my own attorney's correspondence with them, left out information. We had people who had given statements to completely contradict the proof that the prosecutor had the wrong guy, that my company never interacted with any consumer, all this stuff. He removed all of that from the file when he gave it to us. So this is just a bad actor.
Okay, so he claims this prosecutor is a bad actor, someone playing with a stacked deck, a dishonest person, at least according to him. So what do we actually know about this prosecutor? And what does the prosecutor's office itself say about the case?
The prosecutor's office has been very tight-lipped. The only thing they'll say is that there's no arrest warrant outstanding now, so Starr is not under immediate threat. But they won't comment on the investigation itself. That's not unusual. It's still ongoing, and prosecutors are not supposed to talk about open cases. But as you mentioned, the case file wasn't disclosed to him, and that was a huge problem for him and his lawyers. Normally, a suspect has access to the file. Otherwise, how can you defend yourself? You need to know what's being alleged. And you asked about the prosecutor? The case really sits with one man, Pascal Reg. We wanted to know if Starr's accusations against him had any basis, or if this was just the anger of a defendant. What we found was telling. Defense attorneys, including very prominent ones, know Reg well, and they describe him, almost unanimously, as extraordinary, but not in a good way. In main hearings, he's been verbally abusive toward defense lawyers. He's even investigated and raided defense attorneys. In one case, he initiated formal proceedings against the judge who refused to sign one of his arrest warrants because the magistrate said it wasn't lawful. Reg's response? He accused the magistrate of perversion of justice. So, yes, there are a number of examples that suggest he's a very special prosecutor. And that's the man Daniel Starr is up against, which makes Starr's accusations feel quite plausible.
That's really interesting, and good, of course, that you dove around for more information. But how long can this prosecutor, Ray, keep the case going? How long does Daniel Starr have to expect this to drag on?
In theory, this investigation could last a very long time. We're already in year 6. For comparison, look at Cum-Ex. Some of those cases have dragged on 12 or 13 years. Now, this case is simpler. It's a single defendant, not a whole network. But the statute of limitations on tax offenses is very long, and with every new investigative step, the clock resets. So theoretically, this could go on for more than 30 years. That would be extreme, but Starr can certainly expect it to drag on much longer.
And how are Starr and his lawyers handling it now? What's their strategy?
His lawyers had requested access to the file, and only very recently they were granted it. Until then, they were working blind. When your client says, "I'm innocent," but you don't know what evidence exists, you can't mount a defense. Access should be standard, yet here it took years. But either way, Starr's message is the same. After 6 years of investigation, charge me or drop it. If there's enough, indict. If not, close the case. But don't leave me in this endless limbo.
It was frustrating. And here I am, a person with financial means. So imagine if you didn't commit a crime and you don't have any money and people aren't willing to help you, you'd be finished. I'd still be in a cell. I mean, I hired the best attorney in France, and it took him 3 months. I mean, I hired Manuel Noriega's attorney to get me out of this situation, which is pretty insane. And that's why now, as soon as we make a little bit more progress in this, I am suing NRW, and the damages that happened to me because of this are incalculable. All of my business throughout my life has been global. I've never really had US-focused companies. I've not been able to work for the last 3 years because how do I run a global company when I can't leave America? How do I tell a business partner who wants me to go see their operation in another country that I have some sort of weird criminal situation where I'm afraid to travel? It makes people not want to work with you. It damages an otherwise stellar reputation of someone.
I think he raises a crucial point. He's incredibly wealthy. He has the means, the connections, the best lawyers. And even for him, it takes years to make progress, and he still gets treated this way. So what happens to people without those resources? People who might be wrongly accused but have no way to fight back. We say everyone is equal before the law. In theory, yes. But hearing his story, I found it shocking. And also revealing, especially in how he describes life inside jail.
He told us about scenes in prison that sound almost absurd. Escorted in by heavily armed officers, he was placed in a group cell with 15 others. Sitting there, he quickly realized this was not a situation he could endure for long. Then guards came and ordered him to unlock his phone. At first he refused, but they insisted. They also demanded access to his bank account. A court-appointed lawyer told him, in France, that's the law. Refuse, and you can face up to 2 years in prison, regardless of the underlying charges. So he complied. He opened his phone, his banking app, revealing an enormous amount of money in his account. The guards saw it, and then, as if out of a movie, his phone rang. On the screen, Kevin Costner. Starr had been living in one of Costner's villas. The guards forced him to answer. He said hello, and Costner began talking. Then came the command, put him on speaker. Suddenly, 15 inmates were listening to Kevin Costner on the line. For them, it was entertainment. For Starr, humiliation. That incident got him moved to a single cell. But it left him with a lasting thought. What happens to people without millions in the bank? Without celebrity friends on the line? People who can't hire the best lawyer within 24 hours? That question, he says, has weighed on him ever since.
And now, he's not just defending himself, he's fighting back. He says even if the case is dropped, he won't be satisfied. He's planning to sue the state of North Rhine-Westphalia.
And that's why he's fighting back. He said clearly he won't just accept the damage. It's not only reputational, it's financial. He believes deals collapsed, transactions failed, business opportunities were lost because of the investigation. On top of that, there are the legal fees, which are already enormous. So now he's holding the state of North Rhine-Westphalia liable. He wants compensation.
He estimates the damage in the billions. But beyond the money, there's the time he lost with his family. His father, who was battling cancer, died shortly after he returned home. So what happens now? How do you expect this story to continue?
The Bonn prosecutor's office is under pressure. We know questions are being asked at the Justice Ministry in North Rhine-Westphalia. Even the state chancellery has looked at the case, and the U.S. Embassy has passed it along to higher levels. Officially, the prosecutors always say, "We're just investigating, like in any other case." But behind the scenes, they're under scrutiny. Clearly, some unusual things have happened, and Pascal Reg will have to provide explanations. I don't know if they can just wrap it up quickly, but I don't think they can drag it out forever either. The facts are on the table. It's not so complex that it should take years and years more.
So, not 30 years, but could this turn into a diplomatic stress test between the U.S. and Germany?
Justice and politics are supposed to be separate pillars. That's the principle. In America, it often looks different, but still, that separation is the ideal. It may be that prosecutor Pascal Reck didn't consider that when he pursued Starr. As Folker explained, Reck has a reputation for pushing boundaries, even reporting a judge who refused to sign one of his warrants. But I doubt he realized who he was dealing with here, because Starr isn't only wealthy, he's deeply connected, including in U.S. politics, for example, with Laura Loomer.
That's the U.S. influencer known from the Trump campaign.
I hadn't heard of her before. Oh, you see someone stepping off Air Force One several times a week. You ask, who is she? Profiles in the Washington Post and New York Times describe her influence in startling terms. She has direct access to Trump, decides who gets to see him, who doesn't. Trump listens to her, even to her podcasts. And this Laura Loomer has been fiercely defending Daniel Starr. Their connection isn't fully clear, but strong enough for her to publicly champion his cause. She hasn't just attacked Prosecutor Reck. She's accused the U.S. Embassy of failing in its patriotic duty to protect Starr. She's been relentless. At the same time, Richard Grenell, the former U.S. ambassador, has lobbied on Starr's behalf. Starr himself has visited the White House, and he's connected to Senator J.D. Vance, who is in turn close to Loomer. It may sound wild, but we've seen this before. Think of Tesla and Elon Musk when J.D. Vance suggested the U.S. might reconsider NATO commitments if the EU pressed too hard. Law and politics blurred together, and with Starr, we're seeing that again.
And between entrepreneurs and politics.
And that's new territory for Prosecutor Reck. He's not just facing a defendant, he's facing allies of J.D. Vance. That's a very different fight.
So, in the end, it sounds like a simple termination of proceedings wouldn't be enough anymore. Too much has already happened.
As for Starr's next move, we'll have to see. He's floated the idea of a multi-billion-dollar lawsuit, but maybe if the case is dropped, he decides that's enough. What matters most is that the accusations disappear. A legal battle with the state would be extraordinary, and it could drag on for years. And remember, Starr is a businessman. He's not someone who wants endless legal feuds. So the question is, will he push forward with a massive lawsuit against the state, or close the chapter once the investigation ends?
You'll keep following it, and so will we, here, at Handelsblatt Crime. But let me ask you both one final question. What does this case tell you about our German legal system?
What still surprises me is how this began. A prosecutor applies for a warrant, a judge signs it, and then, months later, a higher court rules it should never have been issued. Legal certainty is supposed to be one of the highest goods in any justice system. And yes, you could argue this proves the system works because the mistake was corrected. But for Starr, it didn't feel like that. He says, I thought Germany was a state where you can trust the rule of law. From Starr's perspective, it looked very different. And that tension between the theory and his reality is what makes this case so unsettling, so troubling.
I'm very curious to see how this story develops. The stakes are high for Daniel Starr, for the prosecutors, and maybe even for the reputation of the German legal system itself. And with that, thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a rating on your podcast platform of choice or send your feedback directly by email to crime@handelsblatt.com. You can also reach out to any of us personally. This was a special English edition of Handelsblatt Crime. We created it so that the unusual case of Daniel Starr could reach a broader international audience. We'll continue following the story, and we hope you'll join us again for the next episode. And who knows, maybe this won't be the last special English edition. Until then, thanks for listening.